Hey everyone, Ryan here, or MandRproductions, and even though I'm on vacation, I felt like I had to make this video. And while I did want to make a video about how much of a disaster LegoCon itself was, I'm actually just going to cover that in next week's Ask MandRproductions. So if you have any specific questions for that video, make sure you leave your comments on the most recent Ask MandRproductions. Anyway, over the last couple of days, the Slave 1 name change has been blown out of the water. And dare I say, there are more people complaining about those who care about the Slave 1 name change than actually care about the Slave 1 name change. It's kind of crazy. And in my opinion, there have been some really poor takes on this, as well as some just straight up misinformation being spread on like Reddit and Twitter and stuff with like lots of likes and upvotes. That's kind of scary to me. So I'm going to try to clear up as much as I can in this video and of course give my opinion on the matter. You'll also hear a lot of background noises like birds, and I think they're doing construction next door, so that's loud. With the official review of the LEGO Star Wars Summer 2021 sets, I immediately noticed something off with the set number 75312, which depicted what we know to be the Slave 1. The box said Boba Fett Starship, but more notable to me was that the LEGO designer presenting it at the natural disaster known as LegoCon 2021 specifically seemed to go out of his way to call it Boba Fett Starship and not even slip up and call it the Slave 1 like they normally would have.
And this is Boba Fett's Starship.
He called it Boba Fett Starship. Are you kidding me?
That?
Why? Why?
Yes.
Why?
And the features of
It's
this
the Slave
one,
1. You've always called it the
line
Slave
of
1.
figures. We've got
Why?
Boba Fett.
Of course.
So if they ever make another Slave Leia, would they change the name from Slave Leia to something else?
Starship Leia?
Carbonite.
So we're going to need some LEGO Star Wars history here before we dive too deep into why this name change is happening, if it's good or bad, and all of that jazz. Every LEGO Star Wars Slave 1 since their inception in the year 2000 has simply been called Slave 1. The year 2000, Slave 1. The year 2006, just Slave 1. The year 2010, just Slave 1. I could have sworn they threw in a Boba Fett Slave 1 in there somewhere. Wasn't there. 2015, UCS, Slave 1. Hello, beautiful. 2019, simply Slave 1 with the addition of 20th Anniversary Edition, but that's still just Slave 1, really. However, in the year 2002, with Jango Fett's Slave 1, they did name it Jango Fett's Slave 1. Notably, not Jango Fett's Starship, Jango Fett's Slave 1. And all of the mini Slave 1s, except for the Polybag / Kabaya Box Slave 1, were just called Slave 1. So this is, I guess, where they slipped in the Boba Fett Slave 1 previously. So I've seen a lot of people saying that LEGO always does this, that LEGO always names ships not what they're named, and why is this a big deal? And it's not a big deal because they called it Boba Fett Starship and the actual name that everyone calls it is the Slave 1. That's not why it's a big deal. There are plenty of examples of LEGO naming sets not what their actual official in-universe name is, and there's nothing wrong with that. They've done it for 20 years, and they'll do it for the next 20 years. For example, General Grievous's Starfighter is called the Soulless 1, but they call it General Grievous's Starfighter. Who cares? Nobody. The reason people care about the Slave 1 is it has always been called the Slave 1, and there seems to be ulterior motive to the changing of the name. And so a lot of people have said, oh, it's a marketing thing. It's because kids aren't going to know what this ship is if they aren't able to tell their parents Boba Fett Starship, but they don't know it's the Slave 1. Look, man, I was 9 years old when I bought my first Slave 1, and I figured it out quite easily, so I don't know what to tell you there. And to counter that as well, if they really needed to have Boba Fett's name in there because nobody knew it was Boba Fett's, without seeing a little Boba Fett minifigure on there, just knowing that's Boba Fett's ship when you look at it, they could have just called it Boba Fett Slave 1 like they did with the Polybag, obviously. They've never done it with any other set. The real counterpoint to all of the, oh, it's for kids in marketing, is literally the last 20 years, man. You can't look at the last 20 years of them calling it the Slave 1 every time and tell me it worked then and it won't work now. That's just completely ridiculous to me. But the name change here isn't because of their own particular marketing ideals. If LEGO had it their way, I'm sure it would be called the Slave 1 again. However, Disney is leading the charge for change here. So it appears, according to what the LEGO designer said, that Disney is the one who doesn't want to use this name anymore, the Slave 1. And the implication here is very obvious, that they don't want to use the word slave. And this became apparent probably like 4 or 5 years ago, whenever, and LEGO hasn't made the figure since. They haven't actually made the figure, I believe, since 2012. But Slave Leia, I believe, was renamed to Prisoner Leia on Disney's end, and I'm not exactly sure what all the details with that are because I haven't paid too much attention to it, and it certainly wasn't as big of a fuss as this has been, especially because this one actually has some product behind it. And so with that particular one, they have renamed her, I believe, but they also haven't made any products of her. I also heard that they just wouldn't make that product anymore, and I don't know if that's true, because there's plausible deniability that they just haven't done one yet because it hasn't fit in the lineup, because they weren't making Slave Leias every year before Disney came along, to be fair. So, you know, it could still happen in the future, but with the rename of Prisoner Leia. But there's also the opportunity where Disney looks at that bikini outfit and says, we don't want a Lego minifigure in a bikini outfit, which is weird, but like, whatever. We'll get back to that, but there is another counter argument that I really want to address here. And that is the, oh, it's just a kid's toy argument. And this one gets me every time, man. If it's just a kid's toy, why are you on Reddit defending it? Or, you know, like, what are you doing? Because you're being counterintuitive to your point. Also, it's not just a kid's toy. There are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of adults, teenagers, people like me, that collect this thing and really, really love and care about this thing. And I don't know how else to get that point across other than saying it really straightforward, because like it's just such a like, I have no defense. I'm just gonna say, oh, it's just a kid's toy, why do you care? And then like, what am I supposed to say to that? Because like, it's the dumbest thing you can say, and it gives no actual counter argument. But it's like, there's no counter argument to that because it's so stupid. So I just feel like that's worth saying. Anytime anyone says that, I completely shut down and ignore them. That's kind of the way I handle that. Like, whatever, man, if that's the way you think, I don't know why you're here defending just a kid's toy, but it is what it is, I guess, on that front. I hate that argument. I think it's really stupid. It's cliche, it's overused, and it's quite simply just not true. It's not just a kid's toy. Lego markets these things towards people of all ages, myself included. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that watch this channel included. It's not just a kid's toy. Screw you. One of the biggest comments I've seen about this, or at least one with the most upvotes, is this guy who grabs his megaphone, gotta have that dramatic effect, and says they are not changing the ship name, they are changing what it says on the box for the Lego set. Same for the ship that the Bad Batch used and many others. So this, I don't think, is the case. And while I see what he means, it kind of all sucks back into what I talked about with like General Grievous' Starfighter. The Bad Batch shuttle is still called the Havoc Marauder on something like the Hot Wheels toy. That's just a kid's toy, but it's called the Havoc Marauder. How could kids possibly figure out what it is if it has the wrong name, that type of thing? And that's the line of thinking I've seen with the Slave 1 that has been so flawed, because for the last 20 years it's been perfectly fine. And I'm living, breathing proof that it's perfectly fine, because I figured it out. I was 9 years old and dumb once. So yes, Lego changed the name on the box, but no, I think Disney is changing the name because it has the implications of the word slave, which I think is really stupid, because obviously the ship has nothing to do with that. So it's yet to be known. I think what this guy is saying is not necessarily known to be untrue, but it is far from known to be true, because Disney themselves have yet to actually say anything. Lego said Disney doesn't want to use it. And that's pretty much all the facts there are here to see as far as what is actually happening here, because Disney hasn't come out and said, we're changing it across the board, and that it will no longer be known as a Slave 1 anywhere and everywhere, or that it's just for their merchandising because they don't want to put the Slave on merch, but they'll still call it the Slave 1 for all intents and purposes. I don't know that. And so I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know that, because that's just disingenuous, and so was that Reddit comment. I'm sorry. It's a good comment, I'm sure. If I could read, I would know that. But, like, it's just not a fact that Disney isn't changing the name across the board yet, because Disney ain't said crap, and honestly, they probably won't. One other interesting thing that came to my attention about this is that the actor that played Boba Fett in the Star Wars special editions or whatever, whenever they made changes to him or something, back in like 2004, is having a field day with this one on Twitter. And I don't really have an opinion on it, I just thought it was interesting enough to share, so yeah, a little wild, but it's there. There's also a change.org petition to change the name of the Slave 1 back, and it has 2,215 signatures as of right now. Now, one of the other conspiracy theories I've seen pop up is that they changed the name because if you search up the name Slave 1 on the internet, that you find some really bad stuff that doesn't have to do with the Lego Star Wars Slave 1. I can say in my experience, and the experience of others that I've seen comment about it, that has not been the case. This seems kind of like the Walt Disney Frozen conspiracy level of conspiracy, although the Frozen one I believe more than this, if you know what I'm talking about. Really wild conspiracy. But I don't see it. I don't think it's happening here. And for it to have gotten away with that for 20 years and all of a sudden now it's a problem, you know, it is, in my opinion, this is happening because of, as the internet calls it or whatever, woke culture. This is like the epitome of cancel culture, or really getting in front of cancel culture, because this thing was probably like 3 years away from getting canceled for being called the Slave One, just because that's the way Twitter works. And so like Disney probably was just like, yeah, if we change it now, we don't get in trouble, So in my opinion, this is like the ultimate example of woke culture. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you whether that's good or bad, because I don't think I'm the guy to tell you that. You can see it differently. You can think that it's just a kid's toy. You're wrong. You can think that they changed it because it will show you bad things if you search the name Slave One. I mean, you can think all sorts of things. I'm sure there's many things I didn't even cover in this video that I didn't even realize are out there as theories as to why it happened. But in general, it probably happened because Disney got woke in this case, and it probably won't ever go back to the Slave One. And this it certainly isn't Lego's doing. To finish this video, we have to go back to one of my least favorite places, 9th grade English class, with the reading of Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. What's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. And to figure out what that means, we have to go to my favorite academic website, urbandictionary.com, which also ended up getting me through the rest of high school and early college. Top definition says asking what significance the name of an object has to the properties of that object. Okay, this definition isn't very good. Basically, it's saying that the name of something is irrelevant, that the name doesn't actually affect what you're seeing or what you're getting. So if my name was Paul instead of Ryan, these would probably be the same videos, if that makes any sense. And the Slave One is still the Slave One, even if it's not called the Slave One. While I do disagree with the woke change of the Slave One's name, because it has nothing to do with what they're changing it for, I think, it's still just the Slave One, and we're all gonna call it the Slave One, much to Disney and Lego's chagrin, and we're just gonna live like that, and it's gonna be fine. So, yeah, this one is going to go under the not such a big deal, but kind of stupid category, and that the people defending Disney and Lego for the change are outnumbering the people actually upset about this by probably a pretty wide margin from what I can tell from, like, the banter on the internet. So, let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. I'm going to try to go enjoy the rest of my vacation, but there are going to be some sleepless nights about this. I don't know how I'm going to cope with this when I get the set.